Hey, how's it going everybody? It's Tyler here with Just Drive. Today we are going to be creating a photo manipulation where we swap in a different background, sunset in my case, it might be mountains, whatever it is, that's what we're going to be doing today, and then basically changing the rest of the photograph to meet the new mood and lighting conditions. So, if you go ahead and check here, I'm going to unhide all of my work. And this is what I originally started with in this case. As you can tell, it's a pretty significant change that we were able to accomplish here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and create today. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with my base photo over here. And just a little tip or trick that I like to use to basically center an object if there's different spacing on both sides like you see here. I like to use the rectangular selection tool and then just come down and select pretty much all the way from the left or right side to your object, and then just do Control C and then Control V, and then use the move tool and move it to the other side of your object, and you can essentially effectively use this as a roller to crop down to then, and then you'll have equal spacing on both sides, and then you can just go ahead and delete that layer. So now that we have our image cropped and ready to go, what we're going to go ahead and do from here is actually duplicate that background layer. And this is something built into Photoshop that I really enjoy. I do this probably on typically 90% of my photos. They have image, auto color, auto contrast, and auto tone, and it generally does a really good job. Of course, to use at your own discretion. It doesn't necessarily work in every case, but it usually does a pretty good job, and creates a very nice set of colors on your photo. So as a start, I'm gonna go ahead and run auto color, auto contrast, auto tone. And as you can see here, unhiding and showing the layer, it does a very good job. It really makes the colors pop and kind of adds some depth to the photograph. So from here, what I did next was add my sunset, background, whatever that may be in your case. Like I said, mountain, whatever it is, we're going to go ahead and bring that into our photograph now. So I have my sunset here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that with Control C, and then hop over here. This photo, because it's right out of my camera, is ridiculous resolution, so for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and resize this to 1920 pixels. You can actually resize images by going to Image, and then Image Resize, or Image Size rather. And then I like to lock the aspect ratio, and then it'll scale the height accordingly so you don't get a pixelated image. And then we're going to go ahead and paste in our sunset with Control V. And as you can tell, I love hotkeys. I'm a programmer by profession, so these are generally my best friend. Then go ahead and use the move tool. We are going to position our sunset where you feel it looks placed well. Try to match it up with, your background, your car. Try to find something that looks believable. In my case, I'm thinking kind of like right around here. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is use the erase tool. And I like to use pretty large brush size and do the soft round brush. And then we're simply just going to kind of erase to fade it into our photograph. And by doing that, it kind of feathers it in. It creates the look of like a it's somewhat realistic, other than the harsh differences in color, of course, which we'll address later in the tutorial here. So we have this issue where we still have the sunset, our background images in front of our car. So how I like to solve this is actually go ahead and just hide your layer for now, and then go ahead and zoom in a bit to a reasonable working distance. And then what you're going to go ahead and do, and this is up to you, I personally like the polygonal lasso tool. I like to go around and essentially select my foreground object, so that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. we're just going to go ahead and work our way around the foreground object and try to get this as close as you can. Just working our way around. You're not going to want any harsh edges on this, as they will stick out like a sore thumb if you have like a sunset behind your car. So definitely try to take your time on this step and work your way through and get some decently clean edges. And there's other lasso tools and whatnot. This is the one that I am most comfortable with and proficient with. I've used it in most cases. So we're just working our way around the car right now. Grabbing kind of everything here. And we're coming down around the front bumper. And then because I positioned the sunset in a position that it was pretty high up in the photo, I only need to basically do this selection of my car because it was mainly around here where the overlap was occurring, and then just go ahead and zoom out. And then you're going to go ahead and unhide your sunset layer or whatever your background may be, and simply hit delete. And it's going to go ahead and basically delete everything that is in that selection, in this case our foreground object. Alright, so at this point we now have our background placed, and while somewhat believable, we run into the issue where all of our grass in this case is green. It just doesn't match the tones and mood of the new background. So as you can see over here in my example file, I actually was able to go ahead and pretty much change the color of the grass to something a bit more dark and match the tone of my background. So to do that, what I like to do is create a new layer and then go to Image, Apply Image, hit OK. And one of my favorite tools to do this job is going to Adjustments and Hue Saturation. So what we're going to go ahead and do in this case, the grass is primarily what we're attempting to change, and this is basically primarily yellow and green. So we're going to start with our yellow and actually go ahead and darken this up. That immediately does a pretty good job. I kind of want to change the green a bit to almost like a bluish green. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just mess with the hue saturation here to achieve this look. And again, you really just need to mess with it to get it exactly where you want. And then as you can see, we're going to have to go in and grab those greens as well. And this is something that's going to vary case to case. It's just something you're going to have to unfortunately mess with to get it, just right where you want it. I'm pretty happy with this. So as you can see, because I just did the hue saturation on the entire image, it also changed our sky. You can actually just use like the eraser tool, and then you're going to go ahead and come in here and just erase anything that you don't want to have that new hue and saturation setting. Alright, so at this point we now changed our grass pretty significantly. It's not that vibrant green anymore. It matches the dark, sunset-ish mood that we're kind of going for in this photo. So again, hopping back to the tutorial on what we're creating here is the next layer I applied is pretty much like a vignette on the photo. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I personally like to create vignette effect in Photoshop. So go ahead and start by creating a new layer, and then on the selection tool you're just going to right click that and do the elliptical marquee tool. And we're going to go ahead and create a circle. And if you actually want to create a perfect circle or square, whatever it may be, with a selection tool, you can actually hold shift and then drag and it'll create a perfect circle for you. And then you can go ahead and kind of move that where you want it in your photograph. In this case, that's pretty much dead center. And then what I like to do to create my vignette effect is once you have your selection where you want it, you're going to go to select and then modify and feather. I like to use 250 pixels. Around that, again, it's something you can play with and see how it affects the outcome. I like 250 pixels. So once that is done, you're just going to right click and do select inverse. And that's basically going to invert your circle to the edges like the vignette effect that we are trying to create. Grab your paint bucket, switch to black, and go ahead and click in that selection, and you've now created a vignette. In this case, I obviously don't want it this dark, so simply just go ahead and lower the opacity to something you're comfortable with. I like to usually go to about 20-25 pixels, or 25% rather. So we now have added a vignette effect to our photo. So at this point, it's looking pretty believable. Now we're just going to go ahead and kind of get into some more color adjustment layers and getting it exactly where we want. So in my example here, the next step that was taken was adding a gradient map, and this is actually one of my favorite gradient maps for these sunset type photos, and it's actually a built-in Photoshop one, and it's very good. So to add a gradient map, you just go down here to your adjustment layers and select gradient map. Like I said, this is one of the built-in Photoshop ones, and to add this, it's actually this purple and orange one. So adding that, and then I like to change the blending mode on this to soft light. And as you can see, it does a great job with, it plays well with these sunset colors. Obviously, you're going to need to drop the opacity a bit in this case. I usually like to, end somewhere around 50%. It depends. Again, it's going to depend case to case. You don't want to darken the object too much. The next thing that I ended up doing in this image was adding a color lookup layer, which in this case is a 3D LUT. 3D LUTs is the most simple summary I can give of a 3D LUT is it basically changes multiple color layers at once. It's basically an effect in a package. It might change some contrast on your image. It might change some, colors. It's basically packaged effects. That's the simplest way to put it. The one that I used in this tutorial is referred to, the name on the LUT is called Mo Warm, and I'll actually include a link down in the description. You can go ahead and download that. It's honestly, for these sunset type photos, it's like my go-to. It's very good for these types of photos. As you can see, it kind of changed a few things like contrast, and the colors changed a bit. It's pretty cool how it works. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and apply that in here. So to do a 3D LUT, you're going to go to the adjustments, and then it's color lookup, and then it has 3D LUT file. And as you can see, I have a ton here. The one that I'm going to be using is called Mo Warm, and as you can see, it changed the colors and contrast. It's a very good LUT. I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity. That's a bit more intense than I want in this case, so we're going to go ahead and drop that to about 50%. So we're coming along here. This is looking pretty believable. We have a few little touch-ups we're gonna make, of course, but it's definitely getting there. In my example here, we then added a gradient map, and this is kind of a combination effect that I like to do on a lot of my photos, is kind of darkening them a bit with a gradient map and an exposure layer. This will darken the background, and then we can come back and touch up our foreground object later. So to do this, and this is an effect that it works in a lot of cases, it's just something I like to do, is create a gradient map. And you're going to go ahead and do a custom gradient map by just clicking on this, and then change your one color to a dark blue. And then you're going to basically fade the dark blue to white. So go ahead and apply that, and you're going to set this to multiply. And as you can see, it darkens the photo significantly. We're just going to go ahead and drop the opacity on this one pretty far. I wound up around 25% in my case, and then immediately follow this with another adjustment layer, which is exposure. I like to use offset in about plus 41, 83, around there is where I usually end up. And then go ahead and just drop the opacity on that, and this will kind of give you that low contrast dark look that is often used in photographs, and at least in the car community. I see this a lot with car photographers. So now that we have that, I mentioned basically how we darkened the background, but we want to increase the the brightness on our foreground object. So as you can see here, I made my foreground object pop a bit while allowing the background and this foreground here to remain dark. So to do this, what we're going to go ahead and do is create a new layer and just go ahead and make a rough selection. I mean, you could make a more specific selection if you wish. I like to just make a rough selection. And you're going to go ahead and do image, apply image. And what this is going to do is it's only going to apply an image of what you selected. So from here, we're going to go ahead and go to image, adjustments, and then brightness and contrast. You're going to go ahead and kind of play with your foreground object and get it where you wish. In my case, I want to brighten it decently significantly. I don't think that's a term. I'm sorry, I'm like multitasking and I'm just making up words at this point. Alright, so once you kind of have your foreground object where you want it, you're just going to go ahead and hit OK. And because we made a square selection, obviously we're going to have these harsh lines and whatnot. You're just going to go ahead and use the eraser tool. I like, again, to use the feather just so it looks believable and kind of feather it into your object. Look at that. Alright, so now our foreground object is popping. Look at that. Big difference. Nice. Alright, so just hopping back to my example yet again. The last and final step in this manipulation is, as you can see, because we took this photo in much different lighting conditions, our lighting no longer matches. We have this white light almost coming down on our car. So what we're going to go ahead and do is create a new layer here. And we're going to go ahead and select our, again, I like to use the polygonal lasso tool. And we're just going to kind of go around here where we want to change this. And just go ahead and work our way around making a selection. And we're working our way around. Just making sure we get everything in the photo that we wish to change. And then we'll use that soft eraser once again and just kind of touch it up once we are satisfied with our result. Alright, so we got our selection, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab the paintbrush tool and just use a decent sized soft brush tool. And then you're gonna go ahead and select the colors. You're gonna go ahead and basically pull up your color picker and find something in your background as far as color that you wish to change your lighting to. So in this selection then, you're actually just going to basically come around here with the brush tool in the selection and pretty much just brush over any place where you want to change the color. And bear with me, my wireless mouse has just died, so I'm going to be continuing this tutorial with my laptop trackpad, so bear with me. Fortunately, we're almost done with the tutorial here. So once you have your brushing complete, you're going to essentially deselect your selection and then go ahead and zoom out. And as you can see, you have these harsh edges, and it looks pretty ridiculous right now. We're going to go ahead and change the blending mode, and in this case I used darken. And then you're just going to go ahead and basically lower the opacity on this until you are comfortable with where it's at and you feel it looks believable with what is occurring in the photograph. Once that is complete, we are pretty much done. Something I just like to finish up my edits with is creating a new layer and then going to image, apply image as always, and then going to filter and sharpen. And then it's usually pretty harsh, so I like to drop the opacity on this, to about 25-30%. And that is it. You have completed your photo manipulation where we basically swapped in a new sky background, whatever that is, and then completely changed the lighting and mood of the photo. If you enjoyed this tutorial, go ahead and hit the like button below this video, subscribe for more. I'm going to be trying to do these pretty regularly. It won't always be a photo manipulation like this. It might be something more basic, just like tips and tricks, realistic edits, just all kinds of Photoshop tips. So enjoy, guys.